Hey guys, welcome back to Skadi Build Vlog episode 3 now. Today's going to be pretty simple. All we're going to be doing today is doing a test boot to make sure that all the pieces are working together. And we're going to do that pretty easily. All we're going to do is take the box of our motherboard and we're going to install the parts in there. It's going to be relatively simple. I'm not going to go too in-depth or too in detail with everything. I'm just going to assume that most of you kind of understand how to put together the computer already, but I will try to stop and explain what I'm doing kind of as I'm going. It's going to work like normal for the most part. I think this is how I'm going to do the building vlogs as we move on in the process. So all we're going to do for this video is just kind of run through putting all the pieces that are important, i.e. the motherboard, the CPU, the memory, and the video card. We're going to give it some power, and we're going to plug it into a monitor, and then we're going to make sure that everything boots up correctly the way that it's supposed to. And so to do that, we're going to go ahead and start with the CPU. So in the video here, all I'm doing is lifting up the retention arm. I'm not taking off that little back plate yet, because as you'll see when we put the CPU in, it'll come off by itself. So we're going to lift up that back plate. We're going to put the CPU on. This is an Intel, so it's got two little notches on the inside, so not on the inside, two little notches on the side of the CPU that you're going to line up with the socket. If this was AMD, I think most of the time it's just a little yellow triangle on the side there that you line up with your socket. So you're just going to make sure that those pieces are in where they're supposed to. You're going to gently push it down. You don't want to apply any pressure to the CPU at this point. Any pressure could bend the pins on the motherboard, and that is not good for it. And then you're going to lower the bracket and the retaining arm. You're going to push it down until it goes, as you're pushing it down, the little black piece should pop off. You want to save that little black piece, don't throw it away. Keep it in your motherboard box in case for whatever reason you have to send the motherboard back. This is a good way to protect the pins. So that'll pop off, move it out of the way, and you're going to push the retention arm all the way down until it goes back into the spot that it started in. One thing to note about the retention arm is it requires a lot of force, so keep that in mind as you're pushing down. It's going to crack and it's going to sound like you're doing all kinds of damage, but don't worry. It shouldn't be anything more than just pushing it down and pushing it over into its spot. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of thermal grease. I'm going to do the X method, and I'm sure it's going to drive people on here absolutely mad. There's a bunch of different ways. I'm not really going to get into it. Just know that there's I'm doing the X way, and don't overdo too much of the thermal grease when you're putting it on there. So we're going to put the thermal grease on, and then we're going to go ahead and apply the heatsink itself. For this test build, since I can't put the liquid cooler one on there because it would require me to do all kinds of crazy work, I'm just going to go ahead and use a Thermal Lake Engine 27, I think is the design of this. Not my favorite, but hey, whatever, it'll get the job done. If you're looking for a little low profile cooler, it might suit your need. So we're going to put it on, we're going to apply the backguard, and then we're going to push the pins down. One thing I didn't like about this cooler was how much force was required to get the pin down, or to get the screw down. Kind of scared me, freaked me out a little bit the first time. But once that's on there, we're going to plug it into the board through the CPU header, and that's going to be it for that. Make sure when you're screwing it down that you're going in a star pattern. Don't do one on each side, and don't tighten it all the way down before moving on to the next one. Screw one screw down, go across, screw the other screw down, go next to it, screw the other screw down a little bit, and keep doing that until it's all the way tight. The next thing we're going to go ahead and install here is going to be the RAM. For the RAM on each, on the little side, you'll see the little brackets. You're going to want to pop those out first. You're going to put your RAM, you're just going to slide it into its slot. Make sure that you're following your motherboard's instructions, because some slots require to be populated depending on how many you're using. Most times if you're using one, it's going to be the second spot. If you're using two, it's going to be the second and fourth, and if you're using four, it's going to be all four of them. But you're just going to put those on there. You're going to push down until the two little slide pins pop back into place, holding your RAM down. Once that's done, that's it. It does take a little bit of force as well, so just be kind of be careful of that. So yeah, that's it for that. Next, we're going to go ahead and put the motherboard on. Or sorry, not the motherboard. The motherboard's already on. Next, we're going to go ahead and put the video card on. Again, this is pretty simple. Just slide it into its PCIe slot, and it should be good to go. Don't use too much force with these bigger cards. They kind of want to bend, so be careful not to let it bend too much, or it might break your PCIe slot on the board. That's not good. So then all we're going to do is add the 24 pin, the 8 pin to the board. We're going to plug in the 24 pin and the 8 pin to the board. We're going to plug in your video card, make sure that it's got power, and we're going to go ahead and jump the board. You can do it a couple different ways. Some boards have a power button built in. Me, for this build, I just went ahead and took the case cable, plugged it into the board, and hit the power on the case button. Or you could use a screwdriver and connect the power switches on your board. Refer to your motherboard booklet for what pins to jump or where to plug it in, but it should be pretty straightforward. So once that's all done, you're going to go ahead and hit the power button, and then we're going to sit here and wait, and hopefully it will boot up the way it goes. One thing to make note of is if you are building an AMD board, if you're using an AMD socket, just be aware that sometimes this process could take a little bit longer than normal, especially if you're used to building an especially if you're used to building an Intel. The AMD chip will take a lot longer on its first boot than an Intel one will. So all we're doing is waiting, and then you should see the BIOS board light up the monitor, and we're good to go. That's pretty much it. I'm gonna take everything else apart and put it all back in where it goes. I gotta take the video card apart and put the water cooling thing on there. I just put the block on there. I've already taken it apart and putting the block on. I did that this past week. For next week's vlog. So again, I'm moving ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. And then the following week, or this week sometime this week, I'll be putting all the parts into the case, and then bending, and then putting the pipe together, and then we'll be good to go. So like and subscribe, because that's it for this video. So like and subscribe if you guys want to see more. Let me know if you got any ideas, and we'll see you next week.